In a magnificent cathedral, a crowd had gathered to witness a momentous assessment ceremony. At the center of it all stood a young boy, kneeling before three priests. The man in the middle, clearly the leader, announced that it was time to reveal the results of the skill evaluation. He called the boy's name, Klaus, and declared that his skill was auto mode. The hall erupted in cheers, and shock rippled through the crowd at the unexpected announcement. The onlookers stared at Klaus, stunned by his rare and mysterious ability. They eagerly called for him to join the Night Knights, or the prestigious Capital Guild. One person shouted for silence as the noise grew overwhelming. Meanwhile, Klaus was taken aback, realizing his skill held endless potential for acquiring powerful abilities. He felt a surge of hope. His path to becoming a legendary adventurer had finally begun, or so he thought. 3 years later, Klaus found himself alone in the misty forest, still stuck at level 10. But why? What exactly was auto mode? At its first level, it granted auto return, allowing him to magically return home from any battlefield, dungeon, or location. Essentially, it only helped him go back home. At level 2, auto travel was unlocked, enabling him to automatically revisit places he had already been. However, since it only worked in familiar places, it had proven mostly useless. With these skills, Klaus had remained at a low rank for 3 years. His former teammates had grown frustrated, calling him a parasite. This was an issue he had long dealt with. Unfortunately, team captains couldn't easily dismiss him, as doing so would reflect poorly on their recruitment skills. Thus, they always sought ways to make him resign on his own, but no one truly stopped him. Klaus had overheard these conversations countless times and had grown numb to the ridicule. Back in the misty forest, Klaus focused and struck down a group of goblins. The last foe standing was the hobgoblin leader, much larger and stronger than its minions. The young adventurer steadied himself, holding his knife in a defensive stance, preparing to finish the mission. Though he had left his team and started accepting solo extermination tasks, he wasn't new to adventuring after 3 years of experience. He charged at the hobgoblin, skillfully dodging its attacks. Seizing an opening, he struck the beast down. With a final leap, he stabbed the hobgoblin in the chest, taking it down on his own. Panting with exhaustion, he caught his breath. He began to carve the monster's body to gather its materials. Inside, he found the hobgoblin's magic stone, which was far larger than a regular goblin's. Klaus smashed the stone with his knife, releasing a surge of magic and experience points. To his surprise, it leveled him up to 11, boosting his stats. A smile spread across his face. Grateful to finally level up after so long, he had feared he'd remain stuck at level 10 forever. His peers, who had started their journeys at the same time, had already reached level 50. Despite his envy, Klaus knew he had no choice but to press forward. Looking at his status, he saw 19 unused points. Moreover, he realized he could upgrade auto mode to level 3. Hoping for something useful, he confirmed the upgrade. He thought of the many times he had been mocked by the Adventurers Guild and the Night Guard, labeled as useless. The laughter still echoed in his mind. Despite his despair, a small flicker of hope remained. With a nervous smile, Klaus hit the upgrade button. When he checked his status, the only new skill was auto-resource gathering. His heart sank as he imagined himself collecting chestnuts and climbing trees on auto mode. Once again, his skill was useless. He laughed bitterly at his misfortune. As the saying went, expectations without results lead only to disappointment. He had hoped for an auto-heal or auto-leveling skill, but instead he got the ability to gather herbs. Defeated, Klaus used auto-return. A countdown appeared before Klaus, showing the destination and the time remaining until his arrival. He activated the skill and lost consciousness, heading back home. As the countdown hit 0, it signaled that Klaus had reached his destination. The young adventurer stirred, finding himself standing at the door of his home. Before he could even knock, the door swung open, and his stepsister Liz greeted him with a bright smile, ushering him inside with a gentle push, insisting he take a bath before dinner. A warm meal awaited on the table, and they both exchanged thanks for their hard work. With a beaming grin, Liz eagerly announced the evening's menu: hearty barley bread and nopa, cabbage stew with bacon. Klaus emerged from the bath, feeling refreshed, but said he would eat after drying his hair. Liz promptly lifted him and seated him at the table, insisting he eat while she dried his hair for him. Instead of being gentle, she rubbed his head vigorously with a towel, explaining that it was important to eat the stew while it was still hot, especially since she had reheated it perfectly. Liz urged Claus to take a bite right away, noticing his low spirits. It wasn't surprising. She was his sister after all. Liz asked if his mood was due to adventuring or the recent upgrade of his skill. He quickly confessed and apologized. Liz, puzzled by his apology, listened as Claus explained that he hadn't earned much money and kept causing her trouble. Their father had yet to return from battle, and their foster father had vanished after escorting a young girl, leaving them to survive on their own. Before Claus could continue, Liz embraced him tightly from behind, asking if he felt better. Panicked, Claus awkwardly muttered that it felt strange for a big brother to feel better from his sister's touch, but Liz ignored his discomfort, explaining that he had misunderstood, for she was still a minor and couldn't work. If anyone was causing trouble, it was her. Liz told him not to blame himself anymore. Still holding her brother tightly, she urged him not to worry too much about his skill, as it had never been useful anyway. Liz added that she was nearing the age to discover her own skill, and promised that, when the time came, she would support him. In that moment, Liz kissed her brother on the forehead, both of them blushing from the unexpected gesture. Liz quickly ran off, saying she was heading to bed, while Claus teased her as a sly little kid before she vanished from the room. Liz turned back briefly, saying that the only thing she ever wished for was Claus's safe return. With that, she wished him good night, leaving Claus smiling softly, comforted by her words, and resolved to try his best again tomorrow. Claus ate his dinner in peaceful contentment, unaware that at that very moment, the skill he had once thought useless and laughable would soon reveal its true potential upon reaching level 3. The real power of auto mode was that it would always automatically fulfill its designated task, whatever that task may be. The next day, Claus was in the resource gathering area of the poisonous swamp, stunned and confused, when he found 30 neatly packaged bags of detox herbs in front of him. Earlier, he had come here to fulfill a herb gathering request from the guild. Though still exhausted after the auto mode upgrade, Claus decided to investigate further. He opened the auto resource menu and was shocked at what he saw. The screen displayed a list of all resources in the area. Among the items was exactly the detox herb he needed for his quest. Another window popped up, asking how many he wanted to collect. He set it to 30 bags, and the window informed him that it would take just 4 minutes to gather everything. It seemed so unreal. It was almost comical. A quick calculation showed it would take less than 10 seconds per bag. Claus activated the skill, immediately falling unconscious. When he woke up, the herbs were neatly packaged and ready to go. This was proof of his skill's true power, but Claus remained skeptical and decided to try again. This time he chose petrification herbs, rarer than detox herbs. In less than 9 minutes, he had 10 bags in hand. Wanting a greater challenge, he selected maca grass, a plant worth 50 times more than detox herbs. Claus was thrilled when, after 15 minutes, he was surrounded by towering, bodybuilder-like plants. Finally, he wanted to try gathering the rarest herb of all, dragon herb, a legendary plant. It was said that a single sprig could buy an entire castle, but the window revealed it would take 127 hours. It would take more than 5 days to gather this rare dragon herb. Claus paused, contemplating. He realized the 5 days referred to the time it took for the plant to mature, not the time for him to harvest it. With a new understanding, he turned toward the canyon behind him. In this case, being in an area full of rare plants would maximize his skill's potential. He quickly made his way to Wailing Gorge, a treacherous and seldom visited area with towering cliffs that emitted deadly toxic gases. The young adventurer wore a gas mask, giving him 2 hours of poison resistance. This place was perilous, but compared to detox herbs worth only a silver coin, the resources here were worth far more. Claus scanned the list of resources and eventually found Mandragora, a legendary and extremely rare plant, worth 10 times its weight in gold. Collecting one would take 24 minutes, a task well within his abilities. He activated auto mode, and immediately, his consciousness faded. As time passed, he slowly came to, holding the Mandragora in his hand. He raised it high, triumphant, feeling that he had just secured a bright future for himself and Liz. Suddenly, the rocks behind him began to tremble and crack, revealing the silhouette of a massive creature. Claus hadn't yet realized what was happening behind him, but the beast drew closer. His sensing skill finally detected its presence. He turned to see the gaping maw of the giant monster, and screamed in horror when he realized it was a B-rank rock lizard targeting him. It swung its massive tail, and Claus barely managed to dodge in time. Terrified by the sight of the beast, Tears streamed down his face as he faced the towering foe. This gorge was supposed to be a low-level area. How could a B-rank monster appear here? He prepared to accept death, repeatedly apologizing to Liz. As he thought of her, an image flashed in his mind, his little sister sobbing in their empty home, all alone. He snapped back to reality, frustrated with his moment of weakness. He couldn't leave Liz by herself, especially after promising to always return safely. With resolve, he drew his knife to face the monster, vowing to survive and return to Liz no matter the cost. Holding the knife and the mandragora, he reminded himself that Liz was waiting for him. Unexpectedly, the lizard turned away, trembling and drooling, visibly distressed. Claus was confused at first, but then he looked at the plant in his hand and realized something. He held it out toward the beast, and the monster became even more agitated. Claus remembered how he had harvested the mandragora in auto mode, and recalled the loud scream the plant had made when uprooted. That sound must have affected the rock lizard. The mandragora's scream drained the life force of anyone nearby, but since Claus had been unconscious during the auto process, he hadn't heard or felt anything. In essence, he was unaffected, while the lizard was paralyzed by the sound. Seizing the opportunity, Claus charged and struck. Blood sprang from the beast. This was his comeback. The boy who had been mocked for years as useless, his skill, once dismissed as worthless, was now his weapon. Instead of giving up, Claus rose to prove his worth, returning home proudly with the head of a B-rank monster. Liz, hanging clothes outside, saw him and welcomed him warmly. It was early morning, and the Adventurers Guild was preparing for a new day. A woman stretched her arms and adjusted her hair. Her name was Tareen, the guild's head receptionist. She declared that she would give her best today. Turning to a pair of younger girls, she noticed their gloomy expressions, but called them over. As the senior members, she scolded them, reminding them that receptionists were the face of the guild, and they must always appear neat and graceful. The girls began to complain, citing tiredness from working overtime and sleepless nights. They begged for a break, but Tareen swiftly cut them off, saying they should be as graceful as swans dancing, never showing their exhaustion to clients. They recalled the events of the previous day, blaming a group of adventurers who had reappeared after a week of silence. They arrived unannounced, bringing a mountain of materials with no prior notice. The two younger women were furious, explaining how the rude adventurers failed to understand the time and effort needed to sort, assess, and organize everything for transport. The senior understood, but told them to wash their faces. Then they wondered aloud about Claus, asking where the low-ranked veteran had gone, as they hadn't seen him in a while. Tareen realized she hadn't seen him either. Just then, Claus burst through the door, wearing a goofy grin. Now at level 19, he appeared unannounced, carrying a heavy load of items that left the three women stunned. They stared at him, their minds flashing back to the chaos caused by the adventurers the day before. The mere thought of working overtime again left them feeling drained. Meanwhile, Tareen calmly approached him, greeting him with a friendly smile. The two younger women were shocked by her calm demeanor. She scolded him for his absence, saying they had been worried. He explained that he had traveled through the poisonous swamp and Wailing Gorge. She chastised him for his disappearance, expressing how deeply they had worried. He calmly explained that he had ventured through the treacherous poisonous swamp and the eerie Wailing Gorge, places where even the bravest seldom dare to tread. And the receptionist finally understood the reason behind the heavy load he carried. She politely informed him that his unannounced arrival was an issue. One of the girls was impressed by how calmly Tareen handled the situation, saying if it had been her client, things would have gone differently. The other girl quickly pointed at Tareen, but silently stomped her foot. Tareen politely asked Claus about the contents of his load, pointing to the rock lizard and explaining that they needed to arrange storage, expert assistance for transport, and more. The younger women finally understood and walked away. Their superiors scolded them, somehow stomping her foot without making a sound, reminding them that their priority was ensuring his safe return. But then Claus interrupted her. He pulled out a mandragora and S-rank materials, saying he wanted to turn them in. A shrill scream suddenly echoed from the mandragora, startling him. Tareen stomped her foot in anger, called him over with rising fury, and invited him into the office for a moment. Both the young women and the adventurer were terrified. Tareen dragged him into the back room while Claus complained, asking what he had done wrong. She told him to shut up and save his excuses until proven innocent. For now, they needed to talk. The door slammed shut. Inside the guildmaster's office, Madame Salazar recognized his name and rank, placing the guild token on the table. Though she reassured him that he hadn't been summoned for punishment, the air in the room was thick with mystery, making Claus feel increasingly nervous. She took a sip of tea, then thanked him for his hard work in the guild. However, she mentioned there was an important matter to address. Claus was taken aback when the mandragora was placed in front of him. Salazar explained that this item wasn't something easily acquired, then asked him to explain where and how he had obtained it. The intense gazes of both the guildmaster and the receptionists turned the atmosphere into a tense interrogation. Trying to ease the tension, Claus offered an excuse, claiming he had found the item in Wailing Gorge. He tried to ease the tension by explaining that he had found it in Wailing Gorge. They sneered at his explanation, clearly skeptical, but ultimately allowed him to leave. After a long discussion, Claus finally exited the guild, weighed down by a very heavy bag. He raised his hand in triumph, proud that he had passed through without telling a single lie. Though he had omitted a few details about auto mode, the anxiety from earlier had melted away. Looking at the bags he carried, his thoughts turned to Liz. He boasted about the money he'd earned, 22 gold coins and 70 silver coins. With a copper coin enough to buy a loaf of barley bread, 1 gold coin was worth 10,000 copper pieces. He had hit the jackpot and could already picture his sister's happiness. However, the payment he received didn't include the reward for the mandragora. Salazar had explained that the retail price of the rare plant was around 250 gold coins. Claus gasped in surprise, but she clarified that was the retail price. The wholesale price would be closer to 65 gold coins. Unfortunately, the guild didn't have enough cash on hand. Despite the guild's relatively large size, Salazar wasn't thrilled. She suggested he exchange it for valuable items, like magic stones, equivalent to the mandragora's worth. Claus agreed and received 13 large magic stones. Compared to the rock lizard's magic stone, this one was medium-sized. With these stones, he could level up further. Excited at the prospect of reaching new heights, Claus jumped for joy and rushed home. Meanwhile, Salazar and Tareen watched him from the guild window. The guildmaster was concerned. Something wasn't right. Just yesterday, this boy had been a nobody, but today he returned with a mandragora and S-rank materials. Moreover, he had ranked up to D and defeated a B-rank rock lizard alone. Salazar decided to keep a close eye on him. He might become someone they could rely on. It was also possible today's events were just a fluke, but that only gave more reason to monitor his actions carefully. The receptionist assured her he wouldn't slip from their sight. Not long after, Claus, now level 27, found himself in a new area uncommon for beginners. The Dusk Mines were infamous for their lack of profit. After witnessing the perfect power of auto mode for gathering plants, Klaus Noldor wondered if the same could work for other resources. He decided to test it, venturing into the mine to try gathering ore. As he entered the cave, a mysterious figure followed him from behind. The Dusk Mines were vast, once mined by an ancient dwarf tribe. Its name came from the twilight illusion caused by glowing stones that lit up the tunnels. This place had been a hub for mithril mining 1,000 years ago. Today's mission was simple: collect 200 glowstones, the essential light sources that powered streets and homes. Though valuable, these glowstones were easy to mine, meaning their price had stagnated. Small glowstones barely sold for anything. But Claus had a trick up his sleeve. He activated the auto mode status menu. The screen showed a list of large glowstones ripe for collection, and just 4 minutes at the cave entrance would get him 20 stones. Seeing how effortless this was, Claus figured today would be an easy payday. With a few taps, he set his goals and activated auto resource gathering. Confidently, Claus began mining, his hammering echoing deeper into the cave. Following him was a shadowy figure. She sighed, chiding him for being so loud. This was Tiara, a mid-rank adventurer and the younger sister of Tareen. She grumbled, only tagging along because her dear sister asked her to. Still, she wondered why a mid-ranker like her had to babysit a low-ranked rookie. Tiara glanced at Claus to express her frustration, only to find he'd vanished. Instinctively, she slipped from her hiding spot, dagger at the ready. But no one else was there. Claus had just disappeared. As she scanned her surroundings, a few loose stones fell from above. Looking up, she saw Claus dangling from a cliff, pickaxes in hand. With a swift motion, he hauled himself up to the top. Tiara was stunned by his agility as he scaled the ledge. Resolving to fulfill her sister's request, she darted up the rocks. Using her grappling hook to ascend, she shouted at him not to underestimate a mid-ranker. But by the time she reached him, Klaus was already climbing higher, leaping and flipping across the stones. He quickly landed on another ledge, leaving Tiara in disbelief. She couldn't help but wonder who this boy really was. With only 20 seconds remaining, Klaus, still in a daze, reached his goal. Suddenly awake, he started chipping away with his gear. As the countdown hit 0, he looked down at a pile of massive glowstones. A grin crept across his face as he admired his haul. With exactly 20 glowstones collected, only 190 remained to complete the quest. At this rate, Klaus would be done in no time. Surveying the area, he unearthed even more large glowstones without needing any special skill. Soon, a massive chunk fell into his hands, making him wonder if this was the legendary super large glowstone. Just then, an even larger stone dropped. Klaus held both gleefully, one giant glowstone and one enormous. Overjoyed, he shouted about the feast he'd have with Liz tonight. Hidden nearby, Tiara rolled her eyes at his noisy celebration. A few minutes later, he had gathered 206 glowstones, 200 large, 5 gigantic, and 1 colossal. Sitting down contentedly, Klaus marveled at the efficiency of his auto-resource gathering skill, but his quest wasn't over. He opened the skill menu again. A range of new ores appeared: copper, iron, lead, gold, silver, hoverstone, even magisteel. Realizing these options changed based on past discoveries, he noted that these new materials weren't guaranteed to be easily found. High-ranked ores, he knew, might take 20 to 200 hours to gather, and were likely in more dangerous locations. He had been lucky with the Mandragora, but such fortune couldn't be relied upon. The menu suddenly displayed an S-rank spirit gem, which required only 30 minutes to gather. Known to store mana, spirit gems sold at astronomical prices to mages. Klaus couldn't contain his excitement at this rare find, startling Tiara as she watched from behind a rock. Legend said spirit gems were crystallized souls, usually found in graveyards, hinting that this one might lie in forbidden tombs. Klaus knew he needed to consider this carefully. It was a life or death choice. The risk lay in what could happen when he awoke from the magic's trance. He'd be vulnerable, remembering how he'd barely survived the rock lizard, saved only by the Mandragora's scream. But now he was stronger, with 14 new levels. His swordsmanship had sharpened, and he wielded a new weapon. Plus, his level 3 sensing skill showed no threats nearby. In the worst case, he still had one last secret technique, though it was untested. Klaus hesitated. But greed won out. He put on his helmet and reactivated auto-resource gathering. The Dusk Mines were known to be a safe, low-ranked dungeon. If not here, then where? But that assumption was only wishful thinking. Suddenly, a gigantic skeleton burst through the cave, blasting Klaus and Tiara backward. They stared in horror as the skeleton raised an enormous sword toward them. 30 minutes earlier, Klaus had activated his auto skill to collect a spirit gem, and as the time completed, he woke with the gem in his hand. Elated, he jumped up in victory, but landed on a pile of bones. Looking around, he realized he was surrounded by scattered skeletons on the ground and along the cave pillars. The vast dark place was entirely unfamiliar, and he let out a scream. Using a large glowstone to light the way, he guessed he might be in an ancient dwarven tomb, occasionally found in old mine. Yet, he had no clue where he was. Wandering in confusion, Klaus pondered how he'd ended up in such a creepy place. He opened his status window, seeing that using auto-return would take only 6 hours to get him home. Since the skill ensured safe passage, he considered it, but it would likely alert the guild about the spirit gem. A vivid image came to mind. Madame Salazar and Tarine questioning him in the tense office of the guildmaster, demanding to know where he'd found the rare gem. Getting back unnoticed was improbable, given his unclear route and the high risk of exposure. He dreaded explaining things without revealing his auto-resource gathering skill. Thus, his only choice was to find an exit himself. Klaus reassured himself that it was just an eerie graveyard, and hoped it wouldn't turn into an undead-filled dungeon. So his only choice was to find his own way out. Klaus felt some relief, telling himself it was just a spooky graveyard. But if it transformed into an underground dungeon, he knew he could end up surrounded by undead skeletons and ghosts. Auto mode was certainly convenient, but landing in a place like this came with real dangers. Using his glowstone as a makeshift lantern, Klaus turned a corner and suddenly collided with Tiara. Both screamed in panic, and Klaus, covering his face in fear, called her a ghost. Tiara snapped out of her shock, feeling insulted, and protested that someone as beautiful as her could never be mistaken for a ghost. Just then, she sensed a powerful presence approaching from behind. Just then, she sensed something powerful behind them, and shoved Claws aside as a massive skeleton warrior charged out, its ominous rattling filling them with dread as they bolted. The creature chased, smashing everything in its path. Klaus cried out, demanding to know what was going on with the giant skeleton. And Tierra explained it was a skeleton knight, a mid-level monster. As an undead guardian of grave dungeons, it was formidable. She admitted it was a tough opponent, armed with quality gear. Even for her. Klaus, somewhat regaining his composure, asked who she was. Dodging his question, Tierra noticed Klaus studying her more closely. Her long, pointed ears and dark skin identified her as a dark elf. He guessed she was around Liz's age, then jokingly compared her to Liz, calling her just as flat. Annoyed by his comment, Tierra punched him, sending him sprawling, and introduced herself, reminding him that referring to others by their race was rude. She also scolded him for his unpleasant look, which he denied giving. They ran through twisting tunnels, but the skeleton knight remained on their trail. Neither knew where it had come from, but it seemed intent on Claws. Unfortunately, they hit a dead end and found themselves cornered. The skeleton knight swung its sword down, and just as Claws froze, Tierra shoved him aside. Claws tumbled away from the impact, and looked back to see Tierra blocking the strike. With her two small daggers, she struggled under the weight of the blow, doubting it was truly just a mid-level monster. Claws shouted Tierra's name, but the dark elf urged him to run, saying she'd hold off the creature to buy him time. Reluctantly, Claws turned and ran, trying not to dwell too much on leaving her behind. Without hesitation, Claws ran, rationalizing that a lowly D-rank adventurer like him couldn't do much here. A flash of Liz's face suddenly filled his mind. Back in the battle, Tierra was still holding off the skeleton knight when Claws suddenly reappeared midair, driving his pickaxe into the creature's helmet. The monster, barely affected but visibly angered, turned its gaze on Claws, swinging its weapon and sending both adventurers crashing against the cave wall. Lying in the debris, Tierra called Claws an idiot for not escaping. He replied that he couldn't do something as cowardly as letting a girl, like Liz, fight for him. There was no way Claws could accept defeat. He wanted Liz to greet him proudly when he returned. Facing the skeleton knight, he warned it to brace itself. He was about to unleash a new skill he had never dared try before. Claws had acquired a new skill after leveling up with a magic stone, but he had kept it sealed, knowing how dangerous it could be. Now, in this dire moment, he activated auto mode, triggering level 4 auto battle. At the first level of auto mode, Claws had auto return, a skill that automatically brought him home from anywhere, without fail. Level 2 unlocked auto travel, allowing him to instantly travel to any place he had visited before, be it a meadow or a dungeon. The third level, auto resource collection, gathered resources without him lifting a finger. Finally, at level 4, auto battle was activated, enabling him to automatically fight enemies, unhindered by fear of defeat. With the skeleton knight marked as the target, the skill estimated a victory time of just 13 minutes. Klaus grinned, imagining how, as a D-rank adventurer, he would defeat a mid-tier monster in only 13 minutes. Meanwhile, Tierra, still in pain, urged him to escape while he felt confident. Klaus gritted his teeth and activated the skill, unsure of what would unfold. He began the activation process. The countdown began, and as always, he drifted into unconsciousness. He fell into a deep sleep, unaware of the chaos unfolding around him. Tierra, frantic, screamed at him, knowing this was no time to sleep. The skeleton knight raised its sword and struck down. Yet, despite being asleep, Claws effortlessly dodged the blow. The monster kept swinging, but every attack missed. Frustrated, it launched a wild barrage, but every strike was avoided with ease by the sleeping adventurer. The skeleton knight's eyes burned with fury, and Tierra's attempts to calm it only made it angrier. After slamming its sword into the ground repeatedly, the dust began to settle. Defeated, Tierra turned away, convinced that Claws had been shredded to pieces. Suddenly, Claws dashed forward, circling the skeleton knight with incredible speed. Tierra stared, stunned. As he was still alive, she wondered if he had provoked the monster on purpose, making it swing wildly. He dodged its attacks effortlessly, but Tierra couldn't fathom what he intended to do, with just a shovel and pickaxe. Then, Claws showed her. With a swift spin of his shovel, he re-engaged the battle, closing the distance for a close-range strike. Appearing behind the monster, he was poised to strike. Tierra gasped in shock. The skeleton knight's helmet fell to the ground, shattered. Claws landed gracefully after his strike, leaving a large crack in the monster's skull. Despite the blow, the creature faced him again, determined to fight. It charged, its sword slicing through the air at blinding speed. Claus dodged each attack narrowly. Then, with his pickaxe in hand, he countered with a blow of his own. Tiara was speechless, both awed and horrified. She watched as Claus, a low-ranked adventurer, fought with such skill against this fearsome creature. Who was this man? Meanwhile, Claus leaped to avoid another sword strike, landing on the handle of his shovel. With less than 8 minutes remaining, he gripped his dagger in one hand and his pickaxe in the other, ready for the next move. Tarine's startled scream echoed through the Adventurers Guild. Her feet were frozen in shock. Before her was the spirit gem that Claus had brought from the Dusk Mines. It radiated with immense power, and she screamed again, now fully aware of the reality of what she was seeing. Alarmed by her reaction, Claus quickly begged her to lower her voice. He covered her mouth, fearful that others might overhear, but it was too late. Whispers had already begun to spread. Some speculated what the gem was, others questioned if it was a mere glowstone. Tarine fell silent, leaning against the counter. She asked Claus if he understood the gravity of the situation. Claus sighed, admitting he had overdone it again, and she told him to stay quiet. Her clenched fist showed how much this mattered. He needed to grasp the situation's significance without her having to explain further. Claus understood all too well. That was precisely why he dreaded what was about to happen. He knew he would be summoned to the office again, facing that terrifying person. The office door creaked open. The guildmaster, Salazar, appeared, his smile sending chills down their spines. Without a word, he pointed directly at them, and the room's cheerful atmosphere vanished instantly. Salazar motioned for them to step inside. Tarine complied, stating she would escort Claus to the office. Once again, Claus found himself seated before the guildmaster. This time, another rare material lay between them. Salazar asked where he had found the spirit gem. Claus chuckled nervously, scratching his head, and claimed he had just stumbled upon it. When pressed for more details, Claus confessed it was found in the Dusk Mines. He insisted it was pure luck, though Salazar's skeptical gaze told him she wasn't convinced. She examined the gem closely. "Do you know how much a gem like this is worth?" she asked. He joked it might be worth a single gold coin. Salazar confirmed his guess was not far off, but not entirely correct. If the gem were the size of a fingertip, it would be worth 1 gold coin. Salazar recounted a tale of a group of heroes who defeated an evil dragon, mentioning a great mage who had accompanied them. Claus recognized the story, but Salazar revealed it was not just a legend, it was real. The mage's staff had held a spirit gem the size of a fist, a rare treasure. Claus stared at the gem before him, then glanced at his own hand. Sweat began to bead on his forehead. He realized that the gem he'd brought was nearly the size of his fist. With a deep sigh, Salazar stated with gravity, "This is a national treasure." Claus' face froze at her words, and silence enveloped the room. Salazar estimated the gem's value at a minimum of 600 gold coins on the retail market, but that was just the starting point. Its true value would be determined after refining, purifying, and crafting it into a staff, potentially reaching 1,000 or even 10,000 gold coins. Claus's head spun as the staggering numbers sank in. Meanwhile, Salazar, pleased by his reaction, explained that if he sold it to the guild, they would offer only 100 gold coins. "It's not a ripoff," she assured him. "That's the price for an unrefined gem." Claus stared at the glittering gold coins piled before him, his mind racing. The gem was worth far more than the 65 gold coins he had earned from capturing the Mandragora. With that amount, he could buy 100,000 loaves of bread and never work again. Suddenly, another box was brought in. 5 large magic stones, each worth 100 gold coins. Claus' eyes locked on the stones, his hands trembling as he was asked which option he would choose. After a long pause, Claus closed his eyes, turned away, and pointed to the box of magic stones. Salazar smiled, understanding that he was aiming for greater power as a top ranker. With the box in hand, Claus was allowed to return home, and the guild eagerly awaited his future contributions. Before he left, Salazar warned him to be cautious. Too much magical essence from the stones could make him explode. Claus was left stunned by the warning, his expression blank as he headed home. 2 people watched him through the guild window, pondering his recent accomplishments. Tarine voiced her doubts. How could a spirit gem be found in a beginner's area? Salazar nodded in agreement, adding that it was strange Claus had survived an attack from a mid-level monster. It was an extraordinary feat, even with a reliable companion. The receptionist understood Salazar was referring to Tiara, and nodded. During his conversation with Salazar, Claus had admitted that someone had helped him in the dungeon battle. To ease the tension, he explained it was impossible for him to defeat the mid-level monster alone, and claimed it was luck that someone had passed by. He even added that without the stranger's help, he would have died. Salazar understood, and Tarine was shocked to learn that Tiara had been mentioned to the guildmaster. Salazar then asked, "Where's this mid-level dark elf now?" Claus tried to deflect the question, remembering what had happened in the dungeon. With only 9 seconds left, the skeleton knight had been pierced, and the magic stone shattered. At 6 seconds, the magic power exploded, flowing into the victor. When the timer hit 0, Claus awoke, feeling excruciating pain from every muscle, bone, and joint. He reached for a potion he had kept, but was stopped by Tiara, who told him that such low-grade potions wouldn't help. She asked if he had anything better, and handed him a vial. Tiara explained that cheap potions like those would kill him before he made it home. Claus drank the potion Tiara gave him, instantly feeling the healing effects. Surprised by the swift recovery, he asked if it was a high potion worth 1 gold coin. Tiara casually drank her own potion and replied, "I don't know what you're talking about. An adventurer should always have one on hand." Claus was astonished that someone as poor and low-ranked as he could possess such an expensive item. Disheartened, he drank the rest of the potion, then finally had the chance to chat. Claus confirmed that Tiara was indeed a mid-level adventurer. She proudly affirmed it, adding that she was a seasoned veteran. Claus wondered why a seasoned adventurer like Tiara was in such a pointless place, a spot even beginners dismissed as useless. Tiara was taken aback by his question. Her true goal had been to observe him closely. As Claus grew suspicious of her odd behavior, Tiara suddenly claimed she had an appointment and needed to leave in haste, cutting him off. Before Claus could express his thanks, Tiara darted away, vanishing without a trace. Back at the guildmaster's office, the dark elf entered. Salazar eyed her, asking if she wanted to reconsider her earlier statement. Frustrated, Tiara explained that she had high hopes for the mid-level adventurer. She placed a pillow on the ground, bowing deeply in apology for her failure. Tiara admitted there was no excuse for her actions. She explained that Claus had acted strangely in the dungeon, and a skeleton knight had appeared unexpectedly while she tried to observe him. The guildmaster, with a stern look, asked if that was reason enough for her to reveal herself and let Claus see her. Salazar saw a silver lining. Thanks to Tiara's presence, Claus had survived the battle. Her mistake was forgiven, but Salazar warned her there wouldn't be another chance. Tiara stammered, and Salazar pressed, asking if she had anything else to add. Unexpectedly, Tiara admitted the guildmaster had misunderstood. She wasn't the one who had defeated the skeleton knight. Salazar asked for more details, questioning if a low-ranked adventurer could truly defeat a mid-level monster. Just then, a knock interrupted the conversation, and Tarine stepped forward to answer. Tiara continued, revealing she had done nothing to defeat the monster, recalling the battle between Claus and the skeleton knight. Claus had been unconscious during the fight, yet he dodged every strike. He executed impossible moves, like kicking his shovel into the skeleton knight's arm joint and slicing it off, then following up with rapid, precise strikes using his weapons. Moments later, he decapitated the monster. Finally, he drove his dagger through the creature's skull, using the same shovel. Tiara confessed that Claus had defeated the monster alone, before she even realized what was happening. The guildmaster stared in shock, disappointed that Tiara had such high expectations of him. Tiara begged that what she said was true, and although she didn't fully understand what happened, the boy had won by himself. Meanwhile, the receptionist spoke with a colleague, puzzled. Salazar summed up Tiara's story. A low-ranked adventurer had defeated a mid-level monster alone. Tiara swore it was true, still kneeling. Tarine flipped through some papers she had received. She abruptly interrupted the conversation, revealing a troubling detail. According to Luke's preliminary report, the monster Claus had fought wasn't mid-level. It was a high-ranking skeleton general. This explained Tiara's struggle. Todos quedaron impactados por esta revelación, ya que significaba que el niño había derrotado sin ayuda a un monstruo de alto nivel. Mientras tanto, en el mercado, Claus felizmente no se daba cuenta del caos que se estaba desarrollando. Simplemente estaba emocionado de comprar carne de rata para su hermana, a pesar de que estaba parado frente a un puesto de pescado. De vuelta en la oficina del gremio, el maestro del gremio y los recepcionistas rodearon a la pobre elfa oscura, presionándola para que confesara y contara todos los detalles de lo que había sucedido en el calabozo. Tiara rompió a llorar, diciendo que era imposible porque ni siquiera ella entendía al niño ni quién era en realidad. Sobre la mesa había un libro de inventario que enumeraba los artículos enviados al gremio en un día específico del mes, verificados y procesados por Terrine. La persona que los envió fue Klaus Noldor, de 18 años, un aventurero rango D del gremio. Entre el botín del bosque brumoso estaban trofeos como 23 orejas de líder de duende, 5 orejas de jefe, 22 dientes de soldado Kubled, 7 dientes de Kubled bis, 21 núcleos de limo verde y una semilla de Lesser Train. Además, Klaus había traído algunos equipos estándar, junto con muchas piedras mágicas pequeñas. El personal del gremio estaba trabajando duro para documentar y procesar todo el botín. Ninguno de ellos oculta su frustración por la cantidad innecesaria de artículos. Terrin rompió su bolígrafo frustrada, irritada por la enorme carga de trabajo que Klaus les había dejado encima. En total, Klaus recibió 26 monedas de oro, 130 de plata y 70 de cobre. El Vittorio felizmente, completamente inconsciente del valor del dinero que acababa de recibir. Mientras tanto, los recepcionistas irradiaban un aura lúgubre, completamente agotados por la carga de trabajo que tenían que soportar. Habían pasado varios días desde que se activó la habilidad modo automático de Klaus y la vida del joven aventurero había cambiado por completo. Sin embargo, la vida del personal del gremio también había cambiado. Terrin, ya tratando de controlar su enojo, le hizo una sugerencia a Klaus sobre la cantidad de artículos que traería. Con un pulgar hacia arriba y una sonrisa tonta, Klaus aceptó la sugerencia sin dudarlo. Riendo, dijo, fácil como un pastel. Los dos recepcionistas en prácticas rompieron a llorar, collándose de la desorientación y la actitud despreocupada de Klaus. Parecía que Klaus no podía comprender la dificultad de procesar y registrar todo el inventario de una sola vez. A pesar del evidente cansancio del personal, él todavía sonrió alegremente y les dijo que volvería pronto. En su mente, Klaus pensaba que todo era demasiado fácil. Autobattle, la habilidad que antes le salvó la vida, ahora se había convertido en su arma secreta. Sin embargo, a pesar de su gran poder, la habilidad conllevaba riesgos importantes. Klaus sabía que podía usarlo para derrotar monstruos de alto nivel, pero ¿qué pasaría si se enfrentara a varios enemigos o de diferentes tipos a la vez? Al darse cuenta de que necesitaba probar esto, Klaus decidió dirigirse al bosque brumoso, un área para principiantes llena de monstruos débiles. Ahora en el nivel 38, estaba listo para experimentar con su nueva habilidad en este bosque familiar. Habiendo estado allí muchas veces, Klaus conocía a todos los monstruos de la zona y estaba seguro de que nada allí podría compararse con el general esqueleto con el que había luchado antes. Klaus activó Autobattle y rápidamente perdió el conocimiento. Cuando la cuenta regresiva llegó a 0, se despertó para ver los resultados ante él. A su alrededor estaban los cuerpos de duendes y kobolds, con sus armas esparcidas por todas partes. Fue una victoria total para el joven aventurero. Ese día, todos los monstruos del bosque brumoso habían sido eliminados. A pesar del espectacular resultado, Klaus salió ileso. Aún así, sabía que una mazmorra despejada pronto se regeneraría después de reunir suficiente miasma para revivir a los monstruos caídos. Klaus se maravilló ante la sensación de limpiar una mazmorra completamente. Solo notó que no había perdido el control a pesar de usar la habilidad varias veces. Autobattle parecía aún más absurdo de lo que pensaba, ya que había eliminado al menos a todos los monstruos de bajo nivel. Se preguntó si también podría acabar con todos los de alto nivel. Sin embargo, la habilidad tenía sus limitaciones, incluido el tiempo de recuperación y los enemigos desconocidos. El tiempo de reutilización fue el tiempo que tuvo que esperar antes de poder usar la habilidad nuevamente, haciendo imposible su uso continuo. La habilidad única del modo automático tenía un tiempo de reutilización de 1 minuto, lo que significa que Klaus tuvo que esperar exactamente 1 minuto entre activaciones de cualquier habilidad automática. Por ejemplo, después de que terminó la recolección automática de recursos, Klaus tuvo que esperar 1 minuto antes de usar Autobattle, lo cual podría ser un problema si un monstruo se echara cerca. El plan habitual sería contraatacar justo después de una emboscada, pero con la limitación del tiempo de reutilización. Significaba que tampoco podía usar el retorno automático para escapar del área durante el tiempo de reutilización. La segunda debilidad fueron los enemigos desconocidos. Si bien Auto Battle le permitió a Klaus luchar de manera efectiva, no podía usarse contra un enemigo que no había encontrado antes. Al luchar contra el general esqueleto, Klaus tuvo que golpearlo al menos una vez antes de que la habilidad se hiciera efectiva. Todo esto demostró que, a pesar de sus inconvenientes, el modo automático seguía siendo un as poderoso en el que Klaus podía confiar. Con esta habilidad, aspiraba a convertirse en un aventurero de primer nivel. Después de un largo día de pruebas en el bosque nublado, Klaus finalmente regresó a casa. Mientras abría la puerta, se preguntó si Liz ya había cenado y se dio cuenta de que se había quedado demasiado atrapado probando sus habilidades. Tan pronto como entró, una cuchara voló directo a su cabeza, rebotando y aterrizando nuevamente en la mano de Liz. Su hermana lo miró furiosa, molesta porque había llegado tarde a casa. Con un puchero, Liz expresó su decepción y le recordó a Klaus que había prometido volver a casa temprano hoy. Como castigo, ella declaró que a él solo se le permitiría comer sopa fría en la cena, señalándolo con la cuchara mientras yacía en el suelo. Klaus se disculpó rápidamente y le pidió que escuchara su explicación. Explicó que se había quedado demasiado atrapado en algo y, cuando se dio cuenta, ya estaba oscuro. A Liz no le importaban sus excusas, insistiendo en que siempre decía lo mismo cada vez que llegaba tarde a casa. Ella trató de calmarse, admitiendo que estaba feliz de verlo disfrutar de su repentino progreso, pero agregó que ya no le importaría si él seguía ignorando todo lo que lo rodeaba y volvía a lastimarse gravemente. Le dio la espalda y entró en la casa. Y fue entonces cuando Klaus se dio cuenta de lo preocupada que había estado desde que él llegó a casa herido después de la batalla con el general esqueleto. Aunque Klaus pensó que todas sus heridas se habían curado gracias a la poción alta que Tierra le había dado, parecía que todavía tenía moretones recientes debajo de la ropa. Liz los había notado y entró en pánico cuando se dio cuenta de lo que había sucedido. Desde entonces, había estado constantemente nerviosa, preocupándose por su seguridad. Klaus se rascó la cabeza y se disculpó, prometiendo que no había hecho nada peligroso desde el incidente del esqueleto. De repente, le preguntó a Liz si había algo que quisiera comprar recientemente. Gritó Liz, molesta por su intento de sobornarla, pero rápidamente siguió adelante y mencionó que si preguntaba, tal vez deberían comprar un juego de cocina nuevo, especialmente uno hecho de mitril, un material raro. Las vasijas de mitril eran increíblemente duraderas y tenían un precio de 12 monedas de oro. Klaus se sorprendió por el costoso pedido y preguntó si era el conjunto que habían visto en la ciudad, con un precio de 2 dígitos en oro. Le sonrió al ver que lo recordaba. Rápidamente dijo que se lo compraría. Klaus recordó sus palabras cuando pasaron por la tienda, cuando se rió del ridículo precio. Les había bromeado diciendo que las olas de mitril probablemente solo se usaban para cocinar dragones. Recordó sus palabras exactas y le preguntó si realmente planeaba cocinar un dragón. Con una mirada y un tono fríos y aterradores, Liz respondió que no era un dragón lo que estaría cocinando, sino, pero su hermano. Klaus entró en pánico ante sus palabras. Liz agregó que si regresaba a casa con más heridas, lo ablandaría con esa ola de mitril. A pesar de sus súplicas para que dejara de bromear sobre situaciones tan dolorosas, Liz se mantuvo seria y dijo que nunca lo perdonaría, incluso si él le suplicara. Liz quería asegurarse de que Klaus nunca volviera a esforzarse demasiado. Pero luego ella se suavizó, le dedicó una sonrisa amable y le pidió que prometiera cuidar de sí mismo. Klaus levantó las manos en señal de rendición y prometió nunca excederse, siempre regresar sano y salvo a casa con su querida hermana pequeña. Sus palabras hicieron que Liz se sonrojara levemente, pero ella sabía que él tenía razón. No hay nada bueno que resulte de intentar lo imposible. Klaus se sacudió el polvo y dijo que debería darse un baño antes de cenar. Se recordó a sí mismo que solo porque apuntara a la cima no significaba que debía lograr a su hermana. Luego, Klaus se volvió hacia Liz y le preguntó si podía cenar sopa caliente en lugar de fría, llamándola continuamente querida. Confundida por sus palabras, Liz finalmente aceptó y le dijo que fuera a bañarse mientras él recalentaba la comida. Klaus reveló que había ganado 27 monedas de oro en su último trabajo y que ahora podían permitirse el juego de cocina de Mithril. Liz estaba encantada. A partir de ese momento, Klaus decidió trabajar duro y pensar las cosas para hacer posible lo imposible. Y así, a la mañana siguiente, en la ciudad, Klaus estaba orgulloso junto al carro tirado por burros que acababa de alquilar, con los ojos brillando ante su nueva compra. Liz lo miró desconcertada y le preguntó qué era mientras le entregaba su lonchera. Klaus explicó que era su nueva arma, un carro tirado por un burro listo para la aventura alquilado al gremio esa mañana. Liz lo empujó a un lado y le dijo rotundamente que sabía que era un carro tirado por un burro, pero se preguntaba si él tenía la intención de convertirse en un comerciante ambulante. Klaus, con su habitual sonrisa engreída, dijo que lo usaría para sus expediciones. Se le ocurrió la idea mientras pensaba en cómo llegar a la cima sin hacer nada demasiado peligroso, lo que preocupaba a Liz. Considerando esto, Klaus decidió que la mejor estrategia para lograr lo imposible era reclutar aliados. Al recordar la noche anterior, cuando tuvo que cargar 700 objetos en su espalda, Klaus se dio cuenta de que un compañero podría ayudarlo a elevar el botín, lo que facilitaría la lucha contra enemigos fuertes y reduciría significativamente su tiempo de regreso, reduciendo sus posibilidades de ser reganado por Liz. Además, un carro tirado por un burro le permitiría explorar lugares más lejanos. Sin embargo, dada la situación actual, con tanta gente evitándolo, Klaus se dio cuenta de que no podía reclutar aliados humanos fácilmente. Sus sentidas palabras hicieron que Liz dudara el dijo que no dijera esas cosas o terminaría dorando temprano en la mañana. Klaus continuó explicando su plan y concluyó que podría solucionar el problema alquilando un burro. Con la ayuda del animal, la mayoría de sus problemas se resolvieron. Al terminar su explicación, Klaus saltó emocionado al carro tirado por burros y declaró que planeaba conquistar 3 lugares diferentes ese día. Liz no podía creer lo que estaba escuchando, pero Klaus, montado en el burro Silver, anunció con confianza que completaría todas las misiones inacabadas en 3 zonas para novatos menos conocidas. Liz intentó detenerlo, diciendo que era imposible visitar 3 lugares en un día, pero ya era demasiado tarde. Klaus ya había desaparecido por el camino. En el gremio de aventureros, Terrin y los demás miembros del personal estaban visiblemente agotados. Una de las chicas confirmó lo que acababa de ver y preguntó si Klaus realmente aceptaba todas las misiones pendientes en las zonas menos conocidas. Otro miembro del personal confirmó, diciendo que Klaus había asumido todas las misiones de Misty Forest ayer, y hoy agregó más de Poison Marsh, Twilight Manes y Welling Gorge. Temblaron, tratando de asegurarse de que no había manera de que Klaus planeara terminar todas estas misiones en un día. Normalmente, un grupo de aventureros tardaría varios días en completar esta cantidad de misiones. No hay manera de que pueda terminarlo todo en un día, ¿verdad? Después de todo, solo alquiló el carro de burros por un día. El personal del gremio tembló, esperando poder salir del trabajo a tiempo hoy. Terrin sonrió y les aseguró que se estaban preocupando demasiado. Incluso si Klaus estuviera en racha, completar tantas misiones en un día era imposible. Otros comenzaron a hablar de los logros recientes de Klaus, señalando que se estaban volviendo preocupantes. Pero Terrin les dijo que no se estresaran demasiado y que simplemente esperaran y vieran qué haría Klaus a continuación. Cuando llegara el momento, el gremio no tendría más remedio que aceptarlo. En la taberna del gremio, un grupo de hombres hablaban de un chico que había vuelto a enojar a Terrin. Uno de ellos preguntó en voz alta qué había hecho el niño esta vez para enojarla, pero su amigo intentó calmarlo, recordándole que Terrin no le pertenecía. Continuaron preguntándose quién era el chico problemático. En otra mesa, una figura encapuchada estaba cenando tranquilamente, escuchando su conversación. La figura decía que el nombre del niño era solo Klaus, y todos en el área sabían que era un aventurero de último rango. La figura encapuchada dejó de comer, se levantó y se acercó al grupo, diciendo que estaban hablando de un tema interesante. Cuando el grupo actuó hostil, el extraño le hizo una señal al camarero para que les ordenara los vasos. Después de trastear un poco, luego se acercó a ellos para unirse a la conversación. El extraño se presentó como Merim, un aventurero de bajo rango, y les pidió que le contara más sobre Klaus, el niño que acababan de mencionar. Un hombre calvo se rió a carcajadas y dijo que Merim parecía interesado en el chico extraño. Merim se sorprendió al oír describir a Klaus como extraño. Mientras tanto, Klaus estaba parado en una estación de carruajes, estudiando atentamente la guía de ruta. Se rió para sí mismo, recordando cómo solía confiar en los carruajes como un método conveniente para que los aventureros principiantes llegaran a los lugares de trabajo cercanos. Pero ahora Klaus ya no era la misma persona. ¿Por qué? Porque había alquilado un burro. Gritando con orgullo, declaró que confiaría en la velocidad y la capacidad de carga del burro. Incluso la mandó plata, aunque su verdadero nombre era Hanako. Hanako dejó escapar un rebuzno de disgusto. De un árbol cercano apareció una pequeña figura. Era tierra. Como de costumbre, le molestaba el constante diálogo interno de Klaus. Ella suspiró, preguntándose por qué había salido tan temprano y por qué estaba usando un burro cuando una vez había dicho que necesitaba velocidad. Ella pensó que tendría más sentido para él montar a caballo que en burro. El elfo oscuro dudó de su juicio. Por lo general, montar en burro era más rápido que caminar, pero no cuando se tiraba de un carro pesado. Pensó que esta decisión probablemente era para ahorrar dinero y concluyó que esa podría ser la razón por la que Klaus todavía era un aventurero de bajo rango. Su tacanería a la hora de gastar en sus expediciones seguramente ralentizó su progreso. Mientras Tierra lo juzgaba en silencio, Klaus ya había subido al carro, listo para su viaje a Poison Marsh. Activó Auto Travel. Le dio un suave toque a Silvereed y aceleró hacia el horizonte a una velocidad increíble. La tierra quedó atrás. Asombrado ante la extraña visión del burro a toda velocidad, no tuvo más remedio que correr tras ellos. Por lo general, se tardaban 2 horas y media en llegar a Poison Marsh a caballo en buenas condiciones. Sin embargo, gracias a Auto Travel, Klaus redujo el tiempo a menos de 1 hora y media. Continuó el viaje, completamente inconsciente debido a la magia, despertando solo cuando se acabó el tiempo. Después del corto viaje, Klaus se encontró en un vasto campo, justo en la entrada de Poison Marsh.